Hi, this is Kirk, the bariatric carnivore. Well, let's mourn the loss of, probably permanently, of clinical experience and its value in your health. It used to be, way back in the day, younger doctors often would look for the opinion of doctors that were much more experienced than they were because they had a great deal of clinical experience. They'd seen so many patients and they'd seen all the different weird symptoms come together, and they could help make really good diagnoses. You relied a lot on the experience of learned fellow doctors who had clinical experience that were smart to help you and guide you. Unfortunately, that's gone by the wayside. And there's basically three things that have killed it. And it's really goes beyond unfortunate. It's just kind of symptomatic of why we've got such a psychopathic system and how it's no longer working for you. So the first thing that helped kill this clinical experience is something that should be a good thing, but it really isn't. And that's the overreliance on RCTs, or random controlled trials. They are held up as the gold standard of evidence. And the only thing that a lot of younger doctors will rely on to help make a decision on a clinical diagnosis is, what are the RCT results? Well, there's a problem with relying solely on RCTs. Number one, the technology's only been around about 50, 60 years. Not that long. Number two, they're expensive to do, and as a result, it limits the scope. The only people that can afford to do a really good RCT is big pharma, people that actually have skin in the game and have a benefit from the outcome. So if you get a good RCT that shows that this particular drug does a particular thing, you're going to receive a benefit from it, you're willing to invest in an RCT. Now, you can't get an RCT to help diagnose appendicitis. That is something that is basically clinical judgment. You've got pain in the side, you've got elevated white blood count, you can't jump up and down. It's an appendicitis, you got to get it out. That's clinical judgment. There's no RCTs on that type of stuff. And as a result, doctors no longer rely on their basic understanding of physiology. They're not relying on their judgment. And too many young doctors only accept things if there's an RCT or meta-analysis that is going to allow them to prescribe certain things. And that is highly limiting. It is not utilizing their own judgment. Thing number two that killed clinical judgment, in my opinion, is flat out greed in the corporate takeover of private practices. Just really about 30 years ago, almost all doctors worked for themselves or were part of a group of other doctors. And they had a great deal of freedom and latitude as to how they dealt with their patients and what they were able to prescribe. And they were able to use their clinical judgment in that particular setting. But they are now owned by big pharmacy chains. They are owned by groups like United Health. There's a lot of private equity groups that are buying up local doctors' offices and practices. As a result, doctors are no longer free to doctor themselves. They are now employees that work for bosses. And these bosses often create really weird incentives that you don't know. And it is unfortunately getting in the way of the clinical judgment of the doctors and destroying, like, my trust in particular with anybody in a particular group. For instance, there was a recent report that came out that showed that doctors were being incentivized for how many patients they got vaccinated. If so many patients, a certain percentage in their client base and their patient profile were vaccinated, then they got a bonus of X numbers of dollars. And it was a higher percentage. They got more as their percentage increased. And that's probably the reason why Some doctors were kicking patients out of their practices who refused to get vaccinated from the last pandemic. And it's horrible that clinical judgment, doctors were not allowed to help a patient make a rational decision whether they wanted to get that vaccination or not based on, okay, have you had it? What's your overall health, etc. You could make a good logical decision if you had a trusted advisor who's free of financial pressures. But unfortunately, corporate medicine has kind of killed that. And frankly, you wonder what perverse incentives are out there that may be affecting my doctor's judgment and what advice they're giving me. Is somebody else there outbidding me? That's number 2. Number 3 is the government itself, particularly California, but it was during COVID when this really became a serious problem for a lot of doctors. There were doctors that were prescribing medicines off-label use that there was good clinical reasons why it looked like it would help during the pandemic. And many of these doctors were getting complaints. They were going to their medical boards. California passed a law that said if you prescribe stuff that goes outside of the known scope of practice, by golly, we're going to take your medical license away. Thankfully, that law was struck down by the state Supreme Court, but you see the pattern. And the message was sent pretty darn loud and clear. If you go outside and you exercise clinical judgment based on your experience, you can lose your license. I mean, frankly, there are people that are militant vegans that really think that all the clinical evidence is 100% unequivocally you need to eat a plant-based diet. And if you have a doctor that's out there pushing a carnivore diet, they're going to be gunning for his license because he's outside the scope of practice. That's happened in New Zealand and in South Africa. So, be aware. There's a lot of doctors that are extremely gun shy. Your family doctor may be very gun shy about prescribing things that are outside of the more mainstream medicine because they're scared of their license, and justifiably so, because the heavy hand of government is coming in between you and your doctor. If a doctor does not prescribe a statin and you have a heart attack, they are ever fearful that they're going to be facing a lawsuit because it was outside of the scope of practice. So always be aware of this and realize that doctors are not as free as you might think to exercise independent clinical judgment for the best interest of you. The system is psychopathic. It is not looking after your best interest. It's looking after itself. Doctors are looking after themselves. There are very few courageous doctors. So what do you do about it? Well, frankly, this is why I think it is more imperative than ever to get healthy and get out of the system. Because when you are healthy and you no longer need a doctor to get a regular prescription filled, you're now free to dump your insurance, to get a catastrophic policy that covers major emergencies for acute problems. When you have an auto wreck, you're covered. When you fall off a ladder, you are covered. For major expenses, unexpected expenses. But as far as getting you healthy, you don't have to worry about it. And if you get a good, and once you start figuring out how, what good health markers are, like, I've got a video on how to order your own blood test and what are kind of important to be monitoring, or get Dr. Berry's book on common sense labs and stuff like that. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, okay, these are the basic things that I really am concerned about. These are the things I want to monitor as far as my health is concerned. I can order my own blood work utilizing outside companies, go to a lab, get my blood drawn, they'll test it, they'll send me the results. And it's not that expensive. I mean, I spend about $180 or so a year doing my own blood work. And I know the key markers of metabolic health. And, I check other things like my vitamin D levels, thyroid levels, kidney function, stuff like that. There's a lot of really good tests out there that I want to pay attention to because I do care about my health. But I don't need a doctor to do it. So they exist, but the only way to make sure that this thing works is to get yourself free of the medical system and realize that your doctor is no longer utilizing their best clinical judgment and experience anymore. It's been ruined by big pharma, some perverse incentives out there, and greed, and frankly, the government. So all those things are all working against you in your quest for good health, and unfortunately destroying your relationship with your doctor. Now, at the end of this video, I wanted to share with you a couple of updates on where I am for the goals this year. I shared in a video that I was working on a couple of different things this year, 3 in particular: grinding my own meat, starting to utilize plyo jumping, and trying to get in my relationship with Diet Mountain Dew. I have been an addict of that for 20 some odd years, and it was time for that addiction to end. And I am proud to announce that it is ending thanks to SodaStream. I'm now just drinking pure carbonated water, and I haven't had a Diet Mountain Dew bottle in my house all year. And it was surprisingly, it was easier than I thought. I had probably freaked myself out over that particular one, but we managed to, maybe a day or so of maybe wanting one, but they're gone. And it's saving me a fortune. I mean, inflation kind of works in my favor on this thing. I think I got addicted to them when I could buy them in bulk when they were on sale for like 89 cents a bottle, and I would buy a ton of them at one time. And they're now over nearly $3 a bottle. So I'm frankly, the idea of stocking up on Diet Mountain Dew at $3 a bottle was kind of working against me. So they kind of priced themselves out of the market in my case, and I'm probably healthier without it. I can't prove it, but I feel better now that I don't have an addiction to Diet Mountain Dew. And the other one that I was trying to do was plyo jumping. I got a box where I started jumping up and down on it, and I started off a little tenuously. I'm not a very coordinated person. I'm not an athlete. I will do athletic stuff, but I really am not, by my standard, an athlete. And I've always been a little bit nervous about jumping up and down on things that are 12 to 14, 16 inches high. But slowly but surely, I mean, I've gotten myself up to the point now where I can do a few sets I'll do a minute of hopping up and down as quickly as I can on the box, taking a couple minutes off, doing it again. And, I'm now getting up to round 3. And my gosh, it is better than sprinting as far as getting your heart rate up. I mean, it's surprising how just jumping up and down on a box with both legs as fast as you can for a minute is really tiring. It will get your heart rate up very, very quickly. Can I point to a blood test or something that shows that it is definitely working? No. All I know is I'm getting stronger, faster, and quicker at being able to do it, which probably means that I'm developing more fast twitch muscles, making myself better to withstand all the things that life may throw at me in the future. So I'm kind of excited about that push. I'm starting to see some progress on it. Who knows? I may go off and buy another box so I can really try to jump high. I may get one of those wild hairs, but we'll see what happens down the road. So anyway, here's hoping that you are making progress this year, that you are trying to get yourself out of the healthcare system, that you're trying to get healthier. It is, one of the great things about living in the United States is, for right now, we have options. And we can make ourselves healthier, we can make ourselves happier, we can get out of the system. And frankly, there's never been a better time in the history of the planet than to get out of the healthcare system and to start taking responsibility for your own health than right now. You have access to more health information than anybody in the history of the planet has ever had. It is there. There's no excuse why anybody should be unhealthy. The problem is you're just lacking the confidence, and you don't realize that other people have done it. And heck, I'm a 60-year-old dude who at 50 was going blind, was 300 pounds and in horrible metabolic shape. And frankly, the medical system did nothing to get me healthy. This is all stuff that I've had to learn on my own over the last decade. I'm trying to give you the best of the stuff that I have learned over the last decade, but it's there for any of us to grab hold of, to take good health as our birthright. And it is something that we can do to make ourselves better so that we can be an example to our kids, hopefully to our grandkids, maybe even if we're really lucky, our great-grandkids, that they look at you spry, young, at 90, and they go, I want that. What are you doing right? And that's what we're trying to hit. That should be your goal. To be your life, your health should be a legacy for future generations. Because this is becoming a crisis when you look down at it. I mean, you look at the bigger picture around the globe, and you realize that we've got some serious international issues, and we could be in some wars. The problem is we don't have enough young people to be able to fight the war. The vast majority of young people are not capable of serving in the military physically. This is a national security threat, as well as an expensive proposition, because we're spending more money per capita on medical care than any other country in the planet, and we're getting the worst results. We're the unhealthiest country in the planet, too. And this is a bad combination. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I hope you get out. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. I try to put out a couple messages each week. I hope you will join us on our tribe. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Join us. Share any comments you've got below. Always keep them respectful. Like you guys. We'll talk to you again soon.